Welcome back to the continuing adventures of the monad. Today, we finally get to talk about the techniques specific to a ray in the construction of the Antahkarana. We start with ray 1, the ray of will and power. To understand the first ray technique, the basic quality of the ray must first be understood. The most important thing to understand is that this ray is dynamic. Imagine a point at the center of this ray of power. That point does not move from the center of that power. It works from that point dynamically. If a word is chosen that would best describe the first ray mode of action, it would be inspiration. The Father inspires a response from the material world, often called the Mother, using Gnostic symbolism. This is accomplished by the Father remaining immovable. From the point where the builder stands, be it human or divine, it works not by the law of attraction, as does the second ray, but by the law of synthesis. This is achieved through the power of the will, focused on a clearly formulated purpose and program. First-ray disciples, like all disciples, have to ascertain which aspects of themselves are on what particular ray. Here we are talking about the rays prevalent in the first triadic envelopes. It is not possible for any disciple who has not taken the I3 to be able to know what their monadic ray is. However, any disciple building the Antahkarana and who has reached the stage of projection should know their soul and their persona rays. They should also remember that their fused or blended potency must form the act of projection. The energy of the monad can be evoked even though you do not know its ray color. A downpour of energy occurs from the 43rd plane of matter towards the working agent, the disciple. However, this is not an act of projection per se. At this stage, the act of projection is the work of the shadow and the reflection. You work out which is the shadow and which is the reflection. An old commentary is reported to say, when dealing with the words of power for each ray, when there is no shadow, for the sun is clear, and no reflection, for the water is no more, then naught remains but the one who stands with eyes directing life and form. The threefold shadow now is one. The three of self exist no more. The higher three descend, and all the nine are one. Await the time. That passage should now all be clearly self-evident. If it isn't, you have not been paying enough attention, and my diagrams have gone to waste. When the soul ray dominates the persona's ray, the self becomes the acting agent, aided by the ray of the lower self. The rays of the lower three envelopes are no longer active. There remains the duality of the soul and the persona. There are no lesser differentiations. Taking a step back from the first ray and looking at all 7 rays, the objective of this presentation is to give a guideline on 3 things. Give the technique of projection. This technique divides into 4 stages. The preparatory stage is where the consciousness becomes focused on the soul ray. An interval in which the disciple realizes with intensity the existence of the point of tension and the visualization of the finished product. A focused activity of the will, according to the ray type, is a line of light or living substance. This is imaginatively and creatively projected from the mental unit 47-4, as far as possible towards the spiritual or third triad. This is why having the ability to use your imagination creatively through visualization is so important. This line of light or bridge is then pictured as colored by two-ray qualities. It is held in stable alignment in the light of the spiritual triad, not the light of the soul. This has been done before at the stage when the mind was held in steady light. The mind is still held in this manner, but the mind, as the agent of the soul and persona, is no longer quiescent. The mind now becomes an active holding agent itself. The next thing that is sought to communicate briefly is the effect of the word of power. When adequate stability has been acquired, the disciple utters the word of power, which serves to carry the light further still towards the third triad. When spoken correctly, the word of power produces three effects. It keeps the channel of the descending light of the spiritual triad clear of all impediments. It reaches, utilizing vibratory activity, the center of power, which we call the spiritual triad. At this time, the triad is focused in the mental atom 47-1. Thus evoked, a thread of triadal light descends. It causes a vibration permeating through the Antahkarana, which in turn evokes a response from the rainbow bridge, which is a larger structure under construction from the efforts of all other disciples. This process furthers the construction of the racial Antahkarana. What is said here today is spoken in symbols. There are no real ups and downs in this process, nor higher and lowers. It is the way our mind works, and so this presentation is used. An outline has been presented that, if followed, will enable any interested party to make real progress in the preparatory understanding required by all who hope someday to take initiation. This brings us to the third point, the nature of initiation. The process of initiation falls into three major expressions of consciousness. The expansion of the consciousness of the disciple's personality into that of its soul. This process completes at the I3. The expansion of this fused and blended consciousness into that of the spiritual triad. This process completes when the I5 is taken. The further expansion of consciousness towards which the masters are working. This is completed when the I7 is taken. Students of esoterics, if they choose to make the effort, are progressing towards the control of the persona. This persona is a fraction of the total stored experiences of the causal envelope, but this is what we regard as ourselves. We know that the challenge is to think from our mental envelopes, yet we are hopelessly enmeshed in our emotional life. And more often than not, it is this lower body that is the driver of our thoughts rather than the container of them. We are told that the disciples of the world are getting so numerous that the hierarchy is focusing on the state of consciousness after taking the I3 rather than before the I3. If you decode this message, we have spoken of this before. There are too many disciples for the master to coach individually. They are relying on their students operating from Unity Consciousness 46 to do the actual teaching. Anyway, the upshot of this change of strategy is that information like this on how to build your own Antahkarana is given out. All you need is a plastic bottle, some sticky tape and a pair of scissors. Voila! You have yourself a shiny new Antahkarana. The time has come to assess where we have got to so far in our discussion of the science of the Antahkarana. This is presented in a tabulated form, which describes the 6 stages so that it is easier to visualize the intended process. How you follow this process is another matter, and its success depends on more than just a theoretical grasp of the process. As they say, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. In this manner, you have the possibility to live life in a more definite manner, using your knowledge of your soul's and persona's rays. You have to focus on blending your consciousness, and from this point, holding your mind steady in the light, utter the words of power, which carry your created thread of light forward towards the spiritual triad. A vexing question that comes to mind is how exactly do you come accurately to know your persona and soul rays? Many clairvoyants say they can tell you this based on seeing your aura. But Lawrence tells us that it takes a master to convey this information accurately. This can no longer be the case if the masters have gone on holiday and left their students in charge of the classroom. So, clearly, there has to be another way to get this information. Wait till you see the words of power. I say see because I have not got a clue how to pronounce them. Anyway, if you have stuck with the program and have not lost the will to live yet, in the next presentation, we outline the whole process discussed so far and then go on to get even more confused in future presentations. See you next time. Thank you.